Hi there, I'm Dr. Aruna Tumala, holistic psychiatrist practicing in Wisconsin, USA. I'm making this video for the Red Door, a nonprofit organization based in New Delhi, India. And the organizers of this institute are Aparna Sanyal and Pranami Tamuli. Thank you to you both for thinking of me and giving me a platform to share my views about mental health and mental well-being. So the first question for me is, why, being a trained psychiatrist, did I choose to go down the integrative path? This is actually this is a very simple answer to this. I say simple because this is actually what happened. I trained in India in NIMHANS, and I did learn a more holistic approach to evaluating mental illnesses, where we looked at the mind, body, physical diseases in the body, neurological diseases especially. We were careful to rule it out. We looked at thyroid and parathyroid. But once all of this was done, the main hypothesis was chemical imbalance, whether it is schizophrenia or depression or anxiety. And we had a handful of chemicals or psychiatric medications that we would use to help our patients. Deep down, you begin to know that the outcomes are not that great. Some people do really well. Most of them don't seem to respond as well as you would expect. And then the whole issue of side effects. So as I was observing this and going about my business of prescribing medications, evaluating patients and prescribing medications, even without my own knowledge, deep down, I had come to a decision that if it were to be my family member, I would not give them these medications. And so, as universe has a way of teaching us lessons, a few years down the road, my loved one, my family member, was exhibiting symptoms of anxiety, nail biting, and hyperactivity. And I was panicking because I knew that if I were to take my loved one to any psychiatrist, they were going to put them on medications. Excuse me. Sorry about that, just recovering from a cold. And I did not want to do that. So that's what really motivated me to look for other causes. Excuse me. Other causes and other ways of treating mental illness. And that's kind of prompted me to attend my first integrative and medicine conference. It was called ABIHM then, American Board of Integrative and Holistic Medicine. It is now called AIHM, Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. My first conference was in October of 2013, and I was exposed to so much of wonderful, curated scientific information that completely blew out this whole idea of what we know of disease. What I thought disease was completely wrong. What I was taught in medical schools and in residency was completely wrong. In fact, what I learned is that our mind-body system, the natural state, is to be healthy, but it is our choices, our diet, our lifestyle, our exposure to toxins, some with our knowledge, some without our knowledge. All of these contribute to a breakdown in our physiology, and what the symptoms of this physiological breakdown is what we call as disease. So in reality, the same root causes apply for diseases like diabetes, and the same root causes also apply for mental illnesses like depression. It was at this conference that I was introduced to Ayurvedic medicine. Having grown up in India, coming out of the British colonial influence, I was born in the 70s, so I didn't experience direct colonial impact, but it definitely existed. For instance, my grandmother would not want us to speak in our home tongue, mother tongue, Telugu. She wanted us to speak in English because that was the genteel language. And so there was some impact of that. And I think one of the other impacts of British colonialism is that we did not value our science, our medicine. So growing up in India, going to medical school, deep down, you are exposed to Unani medicine, Siddha, Ayurveda, homeopathy, but you think that this is not unscientific. But when I went to ABIHM conference and I'm here listening to physicians trained in Ayurvedic medicine, physicians trained in homeopathic medicine, listening to the scientific background of these disciplines and seeing how it can be implemented. The case studies that were presented were mind-blowing. I know I use that word a lot, but that's literally how I felt. I felt exhilarated, a little angry that I went to medical school, completed 2 residencies and a fellowship in geriatric psychiatry, and most of what I was taught was not really the right thing. But I quickly got over that anger and the disappointment and focused on what I needed to do. And it just seemed right, as someone being born in India, having been exposed to Ayurvedic wisdom in our culture. Why did my mom use garlic juice if I had a sty? That comes from Ayurveda. Why do we use turmeric on our cuts and bruises? There's so many things. Why do we use tapioca starch for diarrhea when that happens, especially in children? So many of these things permeate into our culture. Even the Navratri festivals that we celebrate is actually Ayurvedic concept of detoxification, which has to be done at the change of seasons, especially from winter to spring and then from summer into fall. And that's why we have the spring Navratra and the fall Navratras. So much of this was already, I felt it was already in my DNA, maybe fanciful thinking, but I thought that Ayurveda is the medicine that I should follow, and I have not regretted incorporating this medicine. It has given me a deeper understanding about, number 1, how our mind-body system functions, and number 2, how to fix when breakdown happens, how to bring a person back into balance. And folks, there's only few things. It's good diet, so nutrition is very important, clean water, clean air, movement, relationships, relationship with the world, with your family members, loved ones, and with yourself and with a higher spirit, if that is something that you believe in. All these relationships are very, very important. And then movement, I don't know if I mentioned it, but as you can see, it's simple things, and we have to be consistent with it. Why is it easy for a person to think about taking a pain medication every day, 3 times a day, 4 times a day, and become addicted to it, but difficult for them to think about maybe eating, making the right choices in terms of inflammatory foods or anti-inflammatory foods, and exercise and relaxation and massage on a pretty regular basis? That's because we are made to think that taking a pill is an easy cure. It is not. There is no easy fix for anything. And so from my education, so I pursued education in functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, and I combined the science that I was learning from these two to come up with a model that can be applied to psychiatry, to Western psychiatry really, because Ayurveda actually has a complete understanding of psychiatric illnesses. But given my brain is still Western trained, I had to learn how to incorporate all of this. And what I've found is that there are only 3 root causes for medical or physical or mental illnesses. It's bad diet, trauma, both psychological trauma and physiological trauma, especially head injury if you're talking about mental illness. And lastly, it is toxins. And all these 3, they have independent effects as to how they make the body break down. But the most common pathway for all these root causes is inflammation, which begins in the gut, causing leaky gut, and there's a whole lot of science that supports that. But when this inflammation begins to overwhelm a gastrointestinal system and reaches other organs, so if it reaches the brain, we know that we see migraines, multiple sclerosis, bipolar disorder, depression, and all that. If it reaches your joints and you have joint pain and degeneration, it could be rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis. If it goes into your kidneys, it could be SLE. If it remains in your gut, it could be Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. I know for people that are listening to me for the first time, this may seem very fanciful, but I can tell you that when I incorporate this medicine and really basically I'm addressing bad diet, addressing their trauma, especially psychological trauma, and detoxification through Ayurvedic protocols, we find improvement. And trauma, it's very interesting. One of the root causes for disease, according to Ayurveda, the very, very primary root cause, they say, is pragya aparadha, mistake of the intellect. And it took me a while to really understand what this means. The mistake that the intellect is making is that it is separate from the one, from the whole. And because of this separation, it feels lost. It feels alone. It feels unloved and unvalued. And why I tied my thinking about trauma, especially psychological trauma, physical trauma, sexual trauma, when it happens in childhood, what happens is that we are giving the same message to our children, that they are not valuable to us, they are not worthy of our time, attention, and love, and that they are alone in this world, that there is no one to support them, care for them, and love them, and especially love them unconditionally. Unfortunately, we practice conditional love. We are not very good at unconditional love. But all of this can be unlearned, and we can learn and also teach unconditional love for ourselves and for others. And in fact, trauma is such an important component. What I've seen is that the milder the trauma, the milder the illness. The more serious trauma is, the more serious kind of illness we see. And it's not only psychological diseases like PTSD, depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. If you evaluate, really pay attention to the patient's story, you will see that there was some trauma. I find trauma in at least 95% of patients, if not more. But it's not only physical diseases. Psychological trauma alone can cause leaky gut, inflammation, and it has been linked to autoimmunity. So the roots of all of this disease are actually, unfortunately, they are laid down. The causes are unfortunately laid down in early childhood, not by bad parents, but by unconscious, themselves traumatized parents. So it is not about the blame game, but it is really about seeing how we can help the person in front of us with their trauma, but also their diet and toxins and all that, but also teach them so that our next generation has more hope than what we are experiencing right now. So overall, I see there is a lot of hope for all of us, because even us, with all our preconditions for our diseases and illnesses, we can heal and recover. And definitely, once you go down this path, you are going to be that ripple effect that's going to change people around you. And if you are a mom or dad, you're definitely going to have a positive impact for your own children. So this is my message for you all today. Thank you for your time and attention.